Good afternoon, and welcome to the Wednesday afternoon conference call with Trusts Unlimited. This is Jim George speaking. I'm the non-attorney spokesman and facilitator for Trusts Unlimited, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call, particularly those of you calling in for the first time and those that will be listening to the replay over the next 24 to 48 hours. We like to move quickly through these calls and bottom line the information for you. Now, ordinarily, our format is to talk a little bit about the situation in Iraq, as we believe the Iraqi dinar to be the base currency for the potential reset of these other currencies. A few minutes talking about the program we've put in place to assist you, and then we go to a brief Q&A. We're going to have a truncated call today. I was invited, fortunately, to listen, not participate, but listen to a call sponsored by the IMF. My years of work in the Washington, Baltimore area have left me just a little bit of juice, and I have a few individuals in the D.C. area that allow me to listen in to some of the calls that, in my opinion, have a direct effect on the revaluation of the dinar and our work together. That call is beginning right now, so what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about the situation in Iraq today, and then I'm going to have to, unfortunately, close out and move to the call that's coming out of Brussels. I would strongly suggest that if the things people who call in today for the first time find of interest, you can go to YouTube or IQD calls and listen to our replay from April 15th, which has all of the information about the program we've put in place, how to contact us, and get our initial no-obligation package. But let's talk a little bit about the situation in Iraq today. First, by way of disclaimer, of course, Trusts Unlimited is not the purveyor of the dinar and these other currencies. We're not advocating either the sale or purchase of these currencies, but are sharing with you the information as rather substantial currencies holders ourselves, the information we think is relevant. Now, for the last few weeks, I've been talking about a potential window for the reinstitution of the Iraqi dinar in the next 45 to 60 days. So 2 weeks in, we'd be looking at reinstitution in the next 30 to 45 days. As the result of unexpected or expected, depending upon your point of view, complications in Iraq, we're going to push back to the 45 to 60-day window, and that's because of some turmoil and unrest and confusion in Iraq today. There is a vote scheduled next week for the ministerial cabinet for Al-Qasemi. However, now the Shia blocs, who just a week ago said they would not oppose that cabinet, all of a sudden seem to have some problems. Now the Sadrists have stepped up and said that they have reconsidered the appointment of Alawi as the prime minister designate. So over the last 90 days, we've gone from Alawi to Mahdi to Al-Zarfi to Al-Qasemi, and now we're back to Alawi. So these people simply cannot get their act together. It's frustrating for me, and I know it's frustrating for you as well. But there is some good news. The CBI operations are complete. The project Delete the Zeros is done. The lower denoms and coinage is in the possession of the 8 regional banks. Auctions have dropped to a trickle, and the CBI operations are being supervised not only by the financial council established by the Parliament, but by the U.S. Treasury as well. Then we have the issue of the 2020 budget, which of course is in limbo, primarily because of the plummeting oil prices. So the budget as it exists right now does not incorporate the reinstitution and eventual revaluation of the dinar. But the reason I still have a window from 45 to 60 days is that what the Parliament's decided to do is, rather than have a fiscal year annual budget, they're going to do this piecemeal. There are going to be 2 phases. Phase 1 will be a 5-month budget, which will take them through May of this year, and then they're going to go to the 1/12 or month-to-month. because they're doing it in this fashion, it's much easier to insert the reinstitution without creating a situation where the Finance Committee would have to go in and completely redo the budget. They've already got to redo it now because they had assumed between $55 and $60 per barrel for oil, and now we're down, well, as you know, we're in negative territory, although that's going to be short-lived. That has to do not only with the battle to increase the supply globally between initially Russia and then Saudis, but it also has to do with the fact that the global pandemic of the coronavirus has reduced consumption to the point where our reserves are so large that we have nowhere to even store additional oil. There's no reason to even produce more at this time. But all that's going to change probably in the not-too-distant future. We have a huge global pent-up demand, so once we get back on track, the price of oil should probably rise quickly and perhaps substantially higher than the $55 to $60 barrel amount. But again, because the budget's being fractured and we're going to be going after May to basically a month-to-month in Iraq, the reinstitution of the Dinar is much more probable, and I would say possible, if not probable. So we go back to the 45 to 60 days. The last issue before I close out is the United States is really stepping up pressure on Iraq and Iran and the area in general. U.S. troop strength in country in Iraq is actually increasing over the objections of the Shia blocs. The Trump administration's basically told them to pound sand. We have a status of forces agreement, and it's going to be honored by our side whether they like it or not. The U.S. has pretty much neutralized Iran. As a matter of fact, just today, Trump issued an order saying that if the Iranian planes and ships interfere with any military operations in Iraq, they are authorized to use deadly force and destroy whatever obstructions that the Iranians try to place in the way of the United States. Iran is in real trouble right now with the lower price of oil, the sanctions by the United States. The coronavirus, our understanding, is devastating the country. So Iran, and of course, they lost Soleimani, so they're just in real bad. They're just in no position whatsoever to create a problem any longer. In addition, the United States is trying to be an intermediary to provide energy, oil, and gas, refined gas to Iraq in order to circumvent the Iranian sale to Iraq. They've tried to negotiate with the Saudis, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates. So all of these things, once again, are putting the squeeze on Iran and providing to Iraq the energy they need short term. And lastly, the U.S. sanctions are scheduled to resume again on May 1st. So the United States has made it crystal clear that they're not going anywhere. They're not going to allow any further interference by Iran. They're not going to accept the demands of the corrupt pro-Iranian officials in Iraq. They're going to assist Iraq as well. Now, the call that I'm scheduled to go to is sponsored by the IMF. Supposedly, there are three things on the agenda. One is their concern that the United States is nationalizing the Federal Reserve. Now, nationalizing the Federal Reserve has a profound effect on both our monetary and fiscal policy. But because the U.S. dollar is the single largest reserve currency globally, that's going to have an effect on all of the central banking systems globally. The second thing is the repatriation of gold to the United States. Now, this is critical because the repatriation of gold in the United States suggests that we're moving the gold back, or at the very least a Basel III compliant commodity-backed currency, as opposed to the empty full faith and credit debt instrument that the Federal Reserve has been issuing for about 100 years. First, we started with the IMF in 1913, not the IMF, the Federal Reserve in 1913, which essentially created a fiat currency. Then in 1974, we went off the gold standard and created the petrodollar. So the dollar was backed by basically the money that they got the percentages they got from the sale of petroleum globally, which was always done in the U.S. dollar. A good example would be when you go to the bank to exchange your currency, the bank's going to make anywhere from 1% to 2% on the exchange. Well, that's what the United States was doing with the sale of petroleum globally, because they were required to use the U.S. dollar for those contracts. We're basically abandoning the petrodollar in lieu of going back to a gold or commodity-backed currency. And last on the list, IMF loans to countries that are suffering as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. So I want to get to that call. Again, I'm sorry we're truncating this call. I appreciate the time all of you have taken to listen to us on a weekly basis, and I strongly suggest that those of you calling in for the first time, again, go to YouTube or to IQD calls to pick up our call from the 15th last week, and you'll get all of the information, again, about the program we've put in place to assist you, and how you can contact us if you'd like to get our initial no-obligation informational package. So thanks again for listening, and we're scheduled to have our ordinary call next week. Certainly if something of a dramatic nature were to happen between now and then, and that's becoming increasingly more possible, we'll try to get out an emergency email and schedule an emergency call. But failing that, I will be back next week, and I will be discussing what I learned on the call that I'm about to enter in just a few minutes. So have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next week, Wednesday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Bye-bye, everyone.